Canucks are back in the playoffs for the first time since 2020. To speak to that, let's head to Vancouver now and bring in my buddy Farhan Lalji. Farhan, a lot of preseason prognosticators didn't even have the Canucks making the playoffs this year. Now they've won their first division title in 11 years. What's going on in that city right now?
Oh, my goodness. The car flags are out for the last couple of weeks. Everybody's just been talking about playoffs and wanting to get the regular season to the finish line. But, you know, when I go back and think about the last time this team made the playoffs in 2015, it was the final embers of the 2011 team, you know, and when you look at that team, they lose in the Stanley Cup. Then they lose in back-to-back first rounds in 2012 after winning the President's Trophy. Then again in 2013 to San Jose. You know, Alain Vigneault gets fired, and then they miss the playoffs, and then they come back, and it was, you know, you knew they weren't going anywhere. You knew that team's life cycle had been exhausted, and the fans were ready for a change, but nobody thought it would take 9 years to get to another playoff game at home. And, you know, you had a bit of it during the bubble year, but, you know, we're dealing with the pandemic and everything like that. But now, a fresh team. We've kind of watched this group grow. You know, so many high draft picks that went through the process. You go through all those struggles and you deal with it. I think the fans have connected with this group, and it's going to be exciting to see. The city is absolutely on fire right now. A lot of excitement getting ready for Game 1 on Sunday.
All right, let's get to it. It's true the Canucks took all three against the Preds this season, but that was before the U2 debacle. Barry Trotz was so mad about how badly they were playing, he canceled their trip to the Sphere to see U2. Since then, over the last 2 months, the Preds have the best record in the Western Conference. Farhan, the Canucks are 10th over the same stretch. What do you think of this matchup, my friend?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, if you would have asked me a couple of weeks ago, I think a lot of people were picking the Canucks to be first-round fodder, right? They were really playing poorly. They were scuffling to the finish line. And, you know, when I say poorly, it's kind of relative from a Canuck perspective because they've been so good this year that even poor play for Vancouver is .500, right? So it's not like their game had fallen off a cliff, and they were playing without Thatcher Demko, and that was slowly starting to catch up to them as well. But, you know, you also got to look at the Preds, and as good as they've been, they're 4-5-1 in their last 10. So they were on fire. They've come down to earth a little bit. You know, and the Canucks as well, right? I mean, they had such a lead that had been padded out in the Pacific Division that you got the sense that this young team was also looking ahead to the playoffs a little bit, right? Both teams probably got the matchup they wanted, right? I mean, if you're the Canucks, you didn't want to play the Kings. You hadn't beaten the Kings at all in 4 meetings this year. You don't want to face that 1-3-1 trap. You didn't want to face Vegas and the defending Stanley Cup champs and Mark Stone coming back. We're expecting for the early part of that series. So I think a lot of people felt that that's what the Canucks wanted. And if you were anyone near the bottom of the Western Conference playoff race, you probably wanted to face Vancouver. So, you know, but I think Vancouver has tightened up in the last 10 days. I think they're playing better, and I think they've got to feel good about their chances going in. But, I mean, look, Nashville is a high-octane offense. They're second in the league in scoring since the All-Star break. So they're not going to be an easy out by any stretch.
There's been a lot of talk around the league and still is about Rick Tocchet and the job he's done since he took over the team midway through last season. At this point, he's the heavy favorite for the Jack Adams. Where's he had the biggest impact on this team since he took them over?
Well, I think two things. Number one, I think he caught this team at the right time, right? Because he's good friends with Travis Green. And Travis Green had the same core of players, but I don't think they were ready to be coached. I don't think they were mature enough to put themselves in a position to be coached hard. Tocchet came in, established a standard coming off of Bruce Boudreau, who, you know, is a great guy, but probably a little bit more casual than what they're getting out of Rick Tocchet. And he got complete buy-in early. He made some really good relationships with players like JT Miller, had an existing relationship with Connor Garland, got a level of buy-in from Quinn Hughes. So I think he was able to really be demanding at a time when they were ready to have demanding coaching. So it's been a right fit there in terms of timing. But then, you know, in terms of specifically, he's made them a much better defensive team. You know, and that could really pay dividends in this series. So, for example, as good as Nashville has been offensively, they do so much of their damage off the rush. And you look at Vancouver, they're the best team in the NHL this season in terms of defending against the rush. They rank number one in fewest rush chances allowed, 5.2 per game, 4.9 since the All-Star break. So from that stylistic matchup, I think it works well. He's got the forwards buying into getting back and closing that gap and just committing to play a 200-foot game. He's been really detailed with his system. And, you know, you've got to give management some credit because they improve the defense. But again, not only did they improve it, but you've got Rick Tocchet with his system, Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar implementing it. So, just the way this team plays at both ends of the ice. We always knew they had some high-end offensive talent. And even when a guy like Pettersson might not be producing, he's committing defensively. Elias Lindholm comes in from Calgary, isn't necessarily producing, fully committed defensively. So I think if there's one area where he's truly got that buy-in, it's that part of it. This team is willing to get dirty in their own end of the ice.
You mentioned Demko. I want to get back to him. He's back after missing 6 weeks with a knee injury, and he looks pretty good. He looks rested. Statistically, his save percentage and goals against a lot better than UC Saros. But Demko's only got 4 playoff games behind him. Saros is getting ready for his 6th run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Is Demko ready for this, Farhan?
I do think he is, and in those 4 games, he played fantastic. Again, it was the bubble, but that really gave the organization confidence that this could be our guy going forward. And I just think that of all the players on that roster, I think this is the one guy that isn't going to get weighed down by the moment. He is so tunnel visioned and so focused. It's all about his craft. It's all about his technique, making his reads, and the team totally believes in him, right? I mean, everybody in that room gets 3 inches taller when Thatcher Demko's in goal. So, and the other thing is that he's now rested, and that matters because this guy's not been able to stay healthy for most of his seasons, his last 3 seasons as a starter. And if you ask him about getting rest, he kind of chafes at the notion saying he doesn't need it. Well, whether he wanted it or not, he got his rest and got to sit out for 5 weeks. And in the last 2 games that he's played, he's looked good. And more than anything, his timing and his reads have looked good, right? So it doesn't look like he's missed a beat. He's actually really wanted to minimize the fact that there's even been any absence because he's talked about missing 10 weeks and coming back and hitting the ground running and coming back and starting well after an off season. So he's really tried to just minimize the impact of the injury. And yeah, I just think of all the guys, he's going to be just fine. If he struggles, and I don't think he will, it's not going to be because the moment's too big for him.
Demko's one of 6 Canucks who were part of their playoff bubble run in 2020. Elias Pettersson's another one. He had 18 points in 17 games during that run. You hinted at the fact that Pettersson hasn't been playing his best hockey. What's his game look like right now overall?
Yeah, it's been a small uptick, in the positive direction. And it's funny because people say to me, Gino, that, wow, when you look at Pettersson, he's being graded at such a high standard. And I think that's nonsense because the truth is he's been so ordinary since the All-Star break. He's actually been graded on an incredibly low standard that if we just see him generate a few shots on the power play or get a couple of chances, everybody in Vancouver wants to say, okay, like he's starting to figure out and the worm is turning and he's getting better. To me, that's not how he should be graded. He should be graded by this $12 million player, by a player that was a 100-point player a year ago and earned the big contract. So the Canucks need him to be better. And when you look at the overall numbers since the All-Star break, the Canucks have played 33 games. He's been pointless in 16 of those, almost half. They've had 19 games against playoff teams since the All-Star break. He has just 9 points in those games, just 1 goal in 13 games. The slight uptick, 5 points in his last 7 games going into this. He's been a bit more noticeable, but I want to see this guy drive play. I want to see the puck on his stick. Prior to the All-Star break, he ranked 23rd in the league in possession time. Since the All-Star break, he's 109th, and he's got a 15% reduction in possession time in the offensive zone. That's simply not going to work. He's got to have the puck on his stick. He's got to carry it through the neutral zone, enter the zone with confidence. And I think he's going to get some favorable matchups because if you look at who Rick Tocchet will use in matchup roles, he might try to go top line versus top line and have the Forsberg line face the JT Miller line, or you might get Elias Lindholm with Joshua and Garland playing against that Forsberg line. Either way, I don't see it being Pettersson. So he's going to get the favorable matchup in the home games. And if you go to Nashville and you're Andrew Brunette, why would you put your one matchup line against that line? So I think Pettersson's going to be in a position to have an impact, to not be locked up, and the Canucks need him to be the best version of himself because when you look at the matchup between these 2 teams, right? I mean, Nashville's got that elite first line. You got Hughes against Yossi. You got Saros against Demko. But where the Canucks, I think, can separate themselves is depth because they're set up to have 3 productive forward lines. Elias Pettersson has got to carry his weight. And you mentioned he did it in the playoffs the last time. Again, no fans, but he showed he could handle the moment and the adjustments that come at him in the midst of a long series. He can fight through that, so let's see if he can do it again.
Farhan, it's been way too long since the last time we spoke, but I get the sense we're going to be talking a lot with each other right here over the next couple of weeks. Thanks for this, pal.
Looking forward to it, my friend.